Right. Well, it's a similar thing with the Minerals Management Service. They've been regulating BP up front, sideways, backwards, east, west, north, and south, and now they're blaming BP?
Yep.
Give me a break.
Do you see that? I think that public property, or private property rather, is just a tenet of Austrian economics. And I see when they break that, it's just a self-reinforcing cycle. Larger and larger government growth stems out of the first mistake of just veering away from private property in the first place.
I think you said it very well.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll head out to another break here. We'll be right back to Radio Free Market. We were just covering regulation of public property by the government, and coming up, we'll talk about it a little bit more and some of the problems that come about. Welcome back to Radio Free Market. Again, this is a live show, so you're welcome to call in to 1-800-313-9443. I'm Zoe Russell, the guest host today, and my guest is Dr. Walter Block. We are talking about BP and the regulation that private property provides instead of having all this mess with public property. So let's just go into regulation a little bit. I'm going to read you a quote, a comment that I found online, and I just thought it wrapped up perfectly what people always tell me about industry. It's pretty clear that self-regulation never works because industry always has to keep increasing profits, and cutting corners is an easy way to increase profits, even though it can have massive negative effects for the rest of society. We need the government to be the cop who forces industry not to harm the rest of us. In terms of industry in a private ocean, would you still have regulations on business?
Well, in a sense, I don't fully disagree with it, although I certainly disagree with the tenor of that quote. Certainly you need cops, not just for industry, but for anybody. Look, A is a big fat bully and B is a 90-pound weakling, and if A hits B, somebody's got to tell A to cut it out. And there's fraud. People do steal from each other, and businesses are not immune to that. So the cop has to be a referee. The cop has to make sure that people don't violate each other's rights. But when you have a referee in a hockey game, and he picks up the hockey stick, and he starts shooting the puck through one of the nets, well, then he's no longer the referee. Then he's the central planner of the Soviet Union. So there's all the world of difference between a cop who keeps people off of each other's throats and stops rapes and murders and thefts and stuff like that, on the one hand, which is legitimate and reasonable, and on the other hand, where you have this stultification where they regulate every darn thing under the sun. They regulate how much water you can have in your toilet bowl. They regulate what kind of ladder you can have. They regulate what kind of tops has to be on your pill box. I mean, that way is the Sovietization of the economy.
Mm-hmm.
That's not just regulation. That's taking over.
Right.
Now, what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico is, unfortunately, the bad kind of regulation, economic regulation, which is not limited to stopping people, as in the quote, from cutting corners. Yes, you cut corners and you sell a pound's worth of fish and it's only got 15 ounces, you go to jail. But who's the best guarantor of that? Is it the government or is it private enterprise? And a case can be made that even for that sort of a thing, you're much better off with a private certification agency. For example, kosher foods. Is kosher foods a governmental thing? No. But they certify the quality of certain foods. And, there are private agencies that certify that the scales in the butcher shop or in the bakery are going well. But, government, at least if you're having a limited government, the government should be limited to that sort of a thing. But the government is doing way more than that. They're not just blowing the whistle against a foul in hockey. They're, as I said before, they're actually picking up the stick and shooting the puck into one of the nets, and then, the game is ruined, if I can make that analogy. For example, getting back to the BP case, there is an environmental rule that it is illegal to dump water into the Gulf of Mexico that has more than 15 parts per million of impurities. Okay, maybe this is a reasonable rule. I won't get into that. But right now what you have is with this massive oil spill, you've got 10,000 or 100,000 per million of impurities, and you have these Dutch ships that can scoop up acre feet of water, gigantic amounts of water, scoop it up where it's got 100,000, say, impurities per million, and put it back where it only has, say, 25 parts impurities per million, and they won't let them do it. Because the crazy environmental law says that you have to have no more than 15 parts per million. You'd think that if Obama had any horse sense or common sense or whatever, he'd say, okay, look, this is a not unreasonable rule during ordinary times.
Right.
But this is not ordinary times. Let's let those Dutch ships come in and scoop up all the crappy water and dump a little crap back into it instead of, you have to travel thousands of miles away to put the stuff in environmentally safe situations. So there's just no common sense there.
Well, we have a caller on the line, so I'm going to let Patrick from Pennsylvania ask his question of Dr. Block. Patrick, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Zoe. Thanks for taking my call, and I want to say I think you're doing a great job in Michael's absence. And hello, Walter. Hope you're doing well.
Thank you. Good to hear from you.
I teach a class at the University of Iowa in the spring in Austrian economics, and I just wondered if you could give me your take on this to make sure that I'm actually sort of presenting this properly. How would you respond to someone who says, well, homesteading is fine, but
Patrick,
we can't
we're
let
coming up on a break.
Russians...
I'm going to have to cut you off, and then we'll get right back to your question at the start of the next section, which is our long section. So everybody just stick around through the commercials and come back to Radio Free Market.